company. For a while, everyone said, oh, it's going to be Amazon. I said, no, 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 it's going to be Apple, Alphabet, Google fame. No, Morgan Stanley out with a report that says the one that could get there first, Microsoft. Yeah, Microsoft. It used to be the laggard in this biz. All of a sudden, the dinosaur that has not been looking back here would have to appreciate about 25% to get there. A couple of others are closer, but how doable is that? To Market Watch's Craig Smith, Keith Fitz-Gerald. Gentlemen, welcome. Keith, what do you think?
I think it's going to get there. It's the dark horse, and the fact that nobody sees this coming, Neil, is what makes it all the more attractive. They've got a large user base, legacy contracts, and thanks to their new CEO, they are really, really well aligned with everything in the cloud computing space. And the growth there is absolutely phenomenal. You're talking about $1 trillion in corporate IT spending within the next couple of years.
You know, I just look at the numbers as they are now, Craig. Apple at around 860, 70 billion. Is certainly a lot closer than the roughly $715 billion market cap, let's say, of Microsoft or thereabouts. We have it $720 billion. But what do you think?
Well, I agree with Keith, Neil, and he nailed it. Look, cloud computing is the future. And I think CEO Nadella really saw this way ahead of everybody else. And he made the capital expenditures and he put the energy into that space. There are a lot of people competing for that space. You got Oracle, Google, you've got Amazon, you got, gosh, I could give you a whole list of them. But I think the three main front runners, and I'd be curious to know if Keith agrees on this, and that would be Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. And I happen to believe Microsoft's going to win the day, because we've got to keep in mind, when Microsoft started in 1975 with that little geeky-looking guy, Bill Gates, when he wrote the basic interpreter for the Altair 88, he has morphed that company several times. And then when Ballmer left and Nadella took over, they focused completely on the cloud. And I think they're winning that space, and I think they're going to win it big, and I think it could make this company $1 trillion company.
Well, let's talk about something that could rain on this parade then, Keith. And one is what's going on with Facebook, that if there is regulation of Facebook, by extension, there's going to be regulation of other players in the industry, and it could hurt all players. What do you think?
You know, I think that's a very interesting point, Neil. However, I don't think it applies in Microsoft's instance to the extent that people might think. Number one, because you're talking about a growth across the gaming community with the Xbox. You're talking about LinkedIn, where you've got different kinds of profiles. And finally, you're talking about Azure, which has got lots of cloud data computing related to corporations as well as individuals. So it's not the social media phenomenon that's going to get it here. It's the growth that's going to consider. I have rented lips today. The growth that will continue in those particular sectors.
Now, I'm wondering, though, when I look at this, Craig, and of course the market's well off its highs, now barely changed, whether people are beginning to fear that what happens to Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg has to testify that it's certainly going to whip up the entire industry. We saw that a couple of days back, a couple of trading days back, certainly last week in the free throw of that. Do you think that's a justified fear?
Yeah, I do, Neil. And let me tell you, a rising stock market lifts all stocks, but also the gravity of the stock market, when it starts falling, drags all stocks back. And so while I think Microsoft has a clear shot at being $1 trillion company, if this market was to start pulling back and pulling back hard, I think Microsoft would be pulled back with it, unfortunately due to momentum. But once that's over, make no mistake about it, Microsoft is positioned right now, in my opinion, to be the #1 player in the cloud space. And I think the cloud space, whether it be a year or 2 or 5 years from now, is going to be a space where trillions of dollars of revenues come from. And if you look at Microsoft and the way that they are structured, they are clearly in first place, in my opinion, in this race to capture that business. And like Keith said, with 365 Office Suite and Azure alone, those are totally disconnected to the social media space. They're clearly designed to provide services. And I think cloud computing services are going to be a huge, huge cash cow.
I agree on all the above in the macro that would favor, let's say, Microsoft, or for that matter, looking at the robust technology world apart from exclusively social media. But the one thing I'd like to follow up on is I can remember the Netscape and the Microsoft battles with governments, whether it's those abroad in the case of the EU or Microsoft battling justice here. it ends up not being good for that sector in the markets. Are you worried about that? I'm wondering if that's coming into play in the markets, like as we speak.
Are you asking?
You know, here's the thing, Neil. If you're going to talk about that issue, trust is absolutely germane to the discussion. And here what you have is clear violation of trust by a specific company with consumer-related data. Now, Microsoft is fortunate to have a huge number of institutional portfolio owners. They have a lot of institutionals in their database, in their user base. Those things are bound by long-term contracts, very predictable revenue, and it's not a trust issue for them. It's a stability issue for them because it speaks to revenues and their bottom line. I think Facebook is in a world of hurt because consumer trust and outrage is building, and those are very different factors.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both very, very much. We are looking at what's going on right now, where 200-plus point rally has given way to barely